The house stood on a hill, overlooking the valley with the stoic grandeur of a forgotten sentinel. For generations, it had watched over the town below, its towering windows and gabled roof casting shadows that stretched like skeletal fingers across the land. The locals called it the House of the White Lady, a name that dripped with superstition and fear. No one dared to approach it after dark, for they all knew the stories, whispered in hushed voices around crackling fires, recounted in the dim light of taverns as the sun dipped below the horizon. It was said that the house had a soul, one that was as restless as it was tragic. That, at night, the ghost of a woman, dressed in flowing white, could be seen wandering its empty corridors, her figure a fleeting glimpse against the cracked and peeling wallpaper. She appeared at the windows, her eyes wide with sorrow, her mouth moving as if she were silently begging, pleading with those who dared to look upon her. Some swore they heard her weeping, a low, mournful sound that carried on the wind, sending chills down the spine of anyone unlucky enough to be nearby. But who was she? What had brought her to such a fate, to be trapped forever within the confines of those old walls, condemned to wander a house that had long forgotten the warmth of life? The story began over a century ago, when the house was new, its bricks freshly laid, its windows polished and gleaming in the sun. It was built by a wealthy merchant, William Ashcroft, who had made his fortune trading goods across the sea. He wanted a home that would stand as a testament to his success, a grand estate where he could host lavish parties and entertain the town's elite. But more than anything, William wanted a place to share with his beloved wife, Eliza, a woman known for her beauty, grace, and kindness. Eliza had a smile that could light up even the darkest of rooms, her laughter like the tinkling of delicate glass. She was loved by all who met her, her presence a calming balm to those around her. But beneath that serene exterior, there lay a fragility, a delicate nature that few could understand. She had suffered many losses in her life, parents taken too soon, siblings who had succumbed to fever, and with each loss, a piece of her had been chipped away, a small crack in the facade of her perfect composure. William adored her, doted on her, and for a time, they were happy. The house became a place of joy, of music and dance, of laughter and love. But as the years went by, something began to change. Guests would leave the parties early, muttering about cold drafts in rooms that should have been warm, about strange noises in the dead of night, soft, shuffling footsteps, the faint sound of a woman sobbing. William would laugh off their concerns, insisting that the house was simply settling, that old wood creaked, that the wind could play tricks on the mind. But Eliza grew more and more distant. Her eyes, once bright and full of life, now seemed clouded, as if she were peering into some unseen abyss. She would wander the house at night, her white nightgown flowing behind her like a shadow, her hands trailing along the walls as if searching for something or someone. William would find her in the morning, standing at a window, her face pale, her hands trembling. "I saw her again," she would whisper, her voice barely audible. "She's calling to me, she wants me to come." William tried to comfort her, but the fear had taken hold. Eliza spoke of a woman in white, a figure who seemed to emerge from the shadows, who watched her with hollow eyes and beckoned her closer. She would wake in the night, screaming, her hands clutching at her throat, as if she were being strangled by invisible hands. The servants began to quit, one by one, their faces pale with fear. "The house is cursed," they muttered, crossing themselves as they fled. Then, one stormy night, Eliza disappeared. The townspeople searched high and low, their lanterns flickering in the darkness, their voices calling her name over the howling wind. Days passed, and still there was no sign of her. William, frantic with worry, scoured the countryside, his mind racing with thoughts of what could have happened. He returned to the house, hollow and broken, his once proud posture now bent with grief. And that was when he saw her. Standing at the top of the grand staircase, her hair disheveled, her dress torn and muddy, was Eliza. Her eyes were wide, her mouth open in a silent scream. William rushed towards her, his heart pounding in his chest, but as he reached out to touch her, she vanished, a wisp of smoke in the night air. He called for her, his voice echoing through the empty halls, but there was no answer, only the sound of the wind rattling the windows. From that night on, William was a changed man. He shut himself away, his eyes haunted, his voice a mere whisper of what it had once been. He would be seen, late at night, pacing the halls, calling for Eliza, begging her to come back to him. The servants who remained spoke of strange happenings, of doors that opened and closed on their own, of cold spots that would appear without warning, and always, the sound of a woman crying. William was found dead in his study some months later, a look of terror frozen on his face, his hand clutching a letter addressed to Eliza. No one knows what the letter said, for it was burned before anyone could read it, but those who saw it claimed that it was a confession, an apology. Some say he had wronged her, that he had driven her to madness with his jealousy, that he had locked her away in the house to keep her from leaving him. And so the house became known as the House of the White Lady. It stood empty for years, its windows dark, its halls silent, except for the soft sound of footsteps, the faint echo of a woman weeping. Occasionally, a brave soul would venture inside, dared by friends or driven by curiosity, only to emerge pale and shaken, muttering about cold hands that brushed against their skin, about a voice that whispered their name in the darkness. To this day, no one knows what truly happened to Eliza Ashcroft. Some say her spirit remains, trapped within the walls of that old house, forever searching for peace, for answers, for forgiveness. Others believe that the house itself is cursed, that it feeds on sorrow and despair, that it will never be free of its haunted past. But one thing is certain: those who have seen her, those who have felt her presence, will never forget the feeling of those cold eyes upon them, the soft rustle of fabric in the dark, the faint whisper of a voice calling from beyond the grave. The White Lady still walks, and the house on the hill still waits, silent and patient, for its next visitor, for its next story.